Hello and welcome to this session of the Galactic Collaboration Summit. Ask Amy meets Microsoft Teams. Whatever your questions are, I'm here for you. My name is Antje Lamartine. I am Senior Customer Success Manager at If Blueprint in Munich.
And my name is Andreas Krüger. I'm a Principal Consultant with SoftwareOne, and I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP.
All right, let's get started. Dear Amy, my name is Susan, and I'm 17 years old. I would like my boyfriend to sleep over, but my parents aren't crazy about the idea. They're not comfortable with him having access to the whole house and all. How can I make sure that he doesn't even cross paths with my parents? Well, Susan, this is a situation that can be very easily translated into the business world. And in the world of Microsoft Teams, this is guest access. Now, from an adoption and change standpoint, it's really important at the beginning to actually determine the business need. So if there is a business need for guest access within a company, it does make sense to actually turn it on. But of course, just turning it on and not telling your users is a little bit tricky. So it is very important that the users get informed about the guidelines and that we also set standards for things such as file upload or chat, and just generally figure out what the do's and don'ts are that we want to accept and allow within the organization. Because the reality is it's not really that easily visible when there is guest access and when a team has guests in it. So it is always a good assumption to just say that there could always be a guest in my team. So we're careful what we post and what we upload. Andy, how does it look like from the technology standpoint?
So from the technology standpoint, I'd like to talk about terms of use. So bringing a guest into my house is something I want to have rules for it. And so we talk about terms of use. The other part is who can bring guests into a tenant and who's allowed to manage those guests. Let's walk through these settings within the admin centers. The first one would be in the Azure portal, where we talk about external identities and terms of use. It's quite easily achieved to create new terms of use. You click this button, terms of use, and then you give a descriptive name to these terms of use, a display name, and some documents you could upload in various languages. After that, you can require that your users need to expand the terms of use and they need to consent to those terms of use on every device or not. And you can even put on an expiry date on how often they need to renew their consent for these terms of use. Usually, I would go with a short time period. After that, you're having terms of use in place, and so you do have like a contract with those external users, what they are allowed to do within your tenant. Within Teams, you do have additional settings about guest access. These settings more or less focus on the fact that either you allow guests within Teams and what those guests can do within Teams. Let's say they can use calling, or they can join with meetings with video or not. Or some of the settings I like the most is, are they able to edit what they said or even delete their sayings completely. I hope this gives you a brief overview of the parts that allow you the management of guests within your tenant or in your house. I'm quite sure we do have another question. Dear Amy, my name is Tom. I'm 16 years old. My girlfriend Emma loves to do live streams, and she often includes me without telling me ahead of time. I really love her, but I'm getting tired of it, and my buddies like to tease me over that. How can I get a handle on that? Hey Antje, what's your perspective on this problem?
Well, Of course, this problem can be very easily transferred into the business world as well, or this challenge. And in Microsoft Teams, it is live events. So when you're planning a live event, planning is essential. Well, what does that mean? You really want to understand the functionality because, I mean, the name says it all. You're going to be live, you want to do a good job, and you don't want to have any hiccups that takes away from the importance of the message that you're actually going to bring on in the live event. So one of the key aspects is really that you know your audience, so you really understand whom you're going to stream to, and that you also prepare to engage. Now, the fun part about the live events really is that it's not just a person or two or maybe three presenting, but you really engage with the audience and create a back and forth where you really transfer information. And so you want to involve the audience. Now, of course, not every audience is ready to engage, and it's always a good idea to actually think about a few questions ahead of time. Heck, bring somebody into the live event, and if nobody asks questions, maybe that person is prepared to ask the first or the second question to actually warm up all the other participants. So in live events, it's also important to understand that you have moderator mode and also presenter mode, and it should be discussed beforehand if the questions are going to be asked during the live event, or if then maybe the producer the moderator is going to take care of them. But also don't forget that you probably also have team members within your organizations that were not able to actually make the live event. And if you still want to reach out to them, it's a good idea to record your event. And then as you send out communication about the recording, you can still enhance the message again and drive home the point that you wanted to make. I also like the idea to actually include a feedback survey, because the reality is maybe there were some questions that people were not, that didn't have the courage to ask, but they're going to do it anonymously in a feedback survey. And then this way you can actually engage with your audience beyond the actual live event and make it last.
So let's talk about how live events can be initiated. From the technology side, it's more or less about different actors. You do have a presenter role, a moderator role, and then all your participants. And running a live event is usually a big thing. You produce your content for this live event, and after that, you want to know how many participants were actively joining your live event. So let's walk through the steps that are necessary to set up a live event. We will switch into our Teams client, into our calendar. And on the top right side, we do have the option to create a live event. Within this dialog, I choose a title, a location, more or less, that's the room you are going to produce it from. And then you do have on the right-hand side the option to invite other presenters. Let's say we will invite Adele. I can choose between producer and presenter in this place. The producer does have some more options on how those presenters can present their content. After that, I click Next, and I do have the option to choose the right permission set on who can join our meeting. Either I select the specific group of people, I make it all organization-wide, or it's a public event, so anyone with the link will be able to join this live event. After that, we can also set some options that we will make the recording available to the attendees, that we want to have an attendee engagement report so that we do know what happened during our live event. And don't miss out this little checkbox down here. It's about Q&A so that you do have the option to engage with your participants. After that, you can also offer a URL to your support team so that if there are any technical issues, there's someone there to help you with this live event. And then we're good to schedule our live event. And it's done. Quite sure there are some more questions for us today.
Oh yeah, we have another one. Dear Amy, my name is Anna and I'm 15 years old. Me and my girls are super close. I know we usually share everything, but this is different. Sometimes I want to share things only with one of them. How can I make sure that certain information stays private? Now, as we're jumping over to Microsoft Teams and the business world, of course, what immediately comes to mind are private teams and also private channels. Now, of course, private teams means that they're not discoverable. And private channel means that I can have a subset or a subspace within a team where only certain people have access. Now, regardless if you turn this on or not, you always do want to determine if there is a business need for that. Now, especially private channels was just released, when was it? November last year? Yeah, it was about November. And I do remember talking to a few people at Ignite, and they were saying, well, I know that private channels was actually part of the user voice, but Teams is really about open collaboration and enabling people to just start up collaboration quickly when there's a need. So private channels kind of goes against it. Now we are here in Germany where we have some users that love to lock up their information. I mean, here I'm thinking also GDPR, and I don't want to share too much information. But the reality really is, before you turn on private channels for your organization, make sure that you understand that there's a business need, and then also define use cases. And of course, with that, it's important to really communicate those guidelines and also to use examples. And one use case example would be that a team collaborates together in their own team, and the manager has one-on-one meetings with his different team members, and he wants to take notes in a OneNote, and every once in a while have the possibility to have a private chat. So for that case, he or she could then open up a private channel and then have this way the privacy to actually talk to individuals without the whole team seeing it. So I think this is a good use case, but nevertheless, make sure that once you have your use cases, that you communicate accordingly, because there are certain things, right, Andy, where there's no way back when you start with a private channel.
Yes, there are some parts you really have to think about in the first place. The first one would be the management of permissions, obviously, because if you want to make something private, you do need to think about who should be able to access this content that I might private to a certain group. In the first part, when we are just talking about private teams, it's more or less easy that all team members will be able to access this content. If we're talking about private channels, then there's a new challenge in the game. If we're talking about those private channels, we can only use a subset of the outer group or the private team to give them permissions to this private channel. So if I need someone else within this private channel, and this person should not be able to get access to all the other content within the team, then the private channel is not the best bet out there. Then you should really think about a private team. And that's also the part of the limitations within private teams, private channels, that you need to know your audience in the first place and to whom you will share your content to. As well as if you're going the way with private channels, you need to know that there are some limitations about other services that are freely available for regular channels and can't be used within private channels. I just want to highlight a bit on how to create a private channel in a team. We will switch over to our Teams client. I will close the dialog, go to Teams, and I do have a team in place. It's called Modern Workplace. This is a more or less quite small team with some members. Let's walk through these members. It's Megan, who's the manager, and then there are 4 members within this team. And Megan wants to have her private space with every of her team members. She can go to the submenu and add a new channel. I will call this 121 with Christy, and set the privacy to private. This means only a specific group of people within the team will be able to access this information within this channel. After that, I do get a dialog about adding some members, and this selection is limited to those 4 members you're already seeing in the back of the screen. After that, I can add Christy to this channel, and I'm good to start over with Christy in this private channel, which is highlighted with this little symbol on the right side. Just keep in mind that from the app perspective, it's limited to some apps that you can use within this channel, and not all apps like Planner and other functionalities are available within this private channel. So if you need those functionalities, go for a private team and not for a private channel.
Now, can I ask you one more question, Andy? So if I started a private channel and at some point I decided that I wanted to make the content and all the chat available to the rest of the team, could I do that?
Sadly, there's no option to do so.
Oh, so there are a few restrictions that we really have to think about when we think about business need and use cases, right?
Yes, and you also should consider that it's not the best option to have a team that only consists of private channels. As from an architectural side, this will get quite complicated to manage. Let's say if you want to sync your files within a team, you usually go to SharePoint and navigate one up and sync the whole documents library. But this won't be possible if you do have private channels, as those files live in their own site collection.
Okay, it's a little bit more complicated than people maybe think.
It is, and it's really good to know the limitations. And there are use cases it's just brilliant for, but in many scenarios, you do need to think twice if it's the best option. So
Okay.
Let's see if we do have some more questions for today. Oh yes, there is one. Hi, my name is Ben. I'm 16 years old. When I send my girlfriend a message, it often takes her a long time to respond. I believe she's hanging out with another guy. What can I do to get faster responses from her?
Well, that leads us straight to chats, mentions, and announcements within Microsoft Teams. This is a really big topic because if you think about it, when most users or a lot of users started to use Microsoft Teams for the first time and they have a smartphone at home, I mean, of course, they were already used to doing chats and also mentions and other apps, from WhatsApp to Facebook to whichever. So now all of a sudden we're in the Teams world, which of course is a business world. So it is, I would definitely recommend to figure out what the best practice is for your organization. And if I think about this a little bit more in detail, I think a fairly conservative organization might not be okay with GIFs and the use of a lot of emojis. So maybe in more conservative organizations, it's expected that the communication is a little bit more formal. Think about this when you decide if you want to enable some of these things or not, because I do think it makes a difference. And I mean, I have seen situations where users just went crazy about the GIFs, and I guess understandably so in some situations. Now, what I really like about the announcements in Microsoft Teams is the fact that we have some pretty neat formatting options. And I personally think that it's actually not being used enough. I just recently was part of a team, was about 300 users, and there were a few things posted into the team. There were definitely key announcements. And I think in the heat of the whole thing, the person posting it probably didn't have time to actually put a nice title in their header. They did use mentions very well, but I have noticed then afterwards that as I was searching, I was thinking, yeah, it would be nice to have this visual impact of a title, maybe in bold, possibly a different color, using bullet points to explain something to then really read through the whole thing and also retain it for myself. So take a look at formatting, encourage your users to use it. And how can you do this? I really like the idea of doing a tips and tricks office hour session as you're rolling out Teams within your organization. Maybe first was a pilot group and then was the wider organization. Consider office hours over the first 2, 3, 4 weeks where you're really just available once or twice a week for an hour. Invite everybody. They don't have to be forced. It's not mandatory to attend. But then this is a way of really engaging the end user and helping them figure out their way within Microsoft Teams, especially if it's brand new and it's an organization that up to then has really just completely lived in emails. And the other thing is also help each other out. I think there are a lot of parallels from email to Teams. So as an example was mentioned in the email world, if I'm not on the to line, if I am on the to line, I know that I'm expected to answer. If I'm on the CC line, to me that means, well, I have the option to read it, but I don't have to. And this is something that I would translate into the mentions function in Microsoft Teams. If you expect an answer from someone, make sure you mention them. And if somebody comes up to you and says, well, hey, Antje, I posted something for you. Why didn't you respond? I think it's okay to just gently say, well, look, I didn't see it. If you really need something from me, feel free to mention me. And then I know that you're expecting something. How does it look like on the technology side, Andy?
So from the technology side, it's quite easy. First thing could be that you're getting overwhelmed by the sheer amount of notifications you get during a day. So there are several options to manage your personal settings as well as specific settings for Teams on how you're going to notify people about new messages. That's the first part. The other perspective would be that you can manage your Teams in a way that you get easy access to the channels you use most often and to those channels that are, let's say, the most important to yourself. This is a thing I'm doing quite a lot as I'm a member of so many teams, and I would say I'm losing track of all those channels. But there are some channels that are so important, I need to get the most fast access to these channels. And so there is a functionality that's called pinning. The other part about big announcements and very important information within Teams and especially within conversations is that you can use formatting to highlight your content. And how it's done, I will walk you through that. Let's switch over to our browser and our team, and I'm going to our general channel. Down here, we can start a new conversation. In the line below that, there is a little A with pen, and this allows us to format our new conversation. We can choose whether this is a new conversation or an announcement. And this announcement, you will see, does have a big headline, as well as lets you choose either a colored background or a picture for your announcement. If you're going with the announcement, keep in mind that this will send out a notification to all members of the team about this new announcement you made. So this is a part maybe not everyone is super happy about, as there will be a ping within their activities, a highlight of their team, a highlight of the channel, and as well an email at some time. If we're going down the road with the announcement, I will type a heading, a subhead, and I can put in some additional text. Let's say, ask Amy and about something, and then mention someone else. Oh, I can't mention myself. That's the trouble of having multiple identities. And so I'm just mentioning Adele. And this will send out additional notifications to Adele once I will publish this conversation. Let's do so. We can see this new conversation does have this big, beautiful heading, this announcement sign on the right-hand side, and the person I mentioned is highlighted as well. But to not be overwhelmed by all those possible notifications, we do have several options to manage them. The first one would be your personal options within the settings menu. You go to notifications, and then there is this large list of all notification settings you can configure more granularly, like only show those things in the feed or in the banner, but not with an additional email. So if you want to go email free, you're good to go with the setting of banner or only the feed setting, as this will give you highlights as well, but it's more or less limited to what's happening within Teams and stays in Teams. So in this case, just to summarize, it's good to know that you do have several options on highlight content and also manage how this content will be pushed to you as soon as you're mentioned or someone mentions a whole team. And this is something you do need to figure out what's the best option for you to have this setting so that you can react as fast as possible, but not get disturbed every time someone posts something that might be important for you. Let's get back to the slide deck.
I think we have one more, right?
Yes, there's one more.
All right. Dear Amy, I'm Christine. I'm 14 years old. I have a great idea for a neighborhood help group and want to engage with the people on our blog quickly, but there are already some great initiatives. Is it okay to create a new group, or should I check with the others first? Well, this translates into Microsoft Teams to guided provisioning versus standard self-service. And from the change, adoption and change side, I recommend that you consider your culture and figure out how you want to do it and what fits best into the way your team members collaborate and interact with each other. Once again, I think I'm repeating myself here. It's important to determine the need, figure out what the requirements are. Probably also makes sense to find out what personas are within the organization and, again, specific use cases. Now, once you make a decision on either guided provisioning or standard self-service, make sure that you communicate the guidelines. And I just added here the who, what, when, why, how. Because generally, if you include these things into your communication message, it just helps end users to wrap their mind around why they can or cannot do something if they understand the reason for that. Andy?
So, and if we are talking about provisioning or self-services, there's usually the fear of chaos. And in many cases, I would say there's no need to fear that chaos, as there is a lot of self-management going on. And groups that seem to be deprecated won't be used for by users. And so you do have the need to engage with the users and as well manage the groups and their life cycles. With lifecycle management, you do get the option to limit, or let's say limit, to be more precise on what groups are alive and are used on a regular basis, and what groups aren't used at all. And if you're having a lifecycle process in place, you're more or less free with the standard self-service, as you get a handle on those groups that are either without an owner or without a member. And you get a handle as well on those groups that are just blank duplicates of other groups that are used more frequently. And in those cases, you can either archive these groups or you can delete them at all. But having a group lifecycle solution in place means that if you're going the manual way for that, it's going to be a task that takes you all day. So the best advice I can give you on that part is to automate as much as possible, to be really reactive with the group lifecycle and send out like proactive messages to the group owners in case there's just one group owner in place or there are no members within the team, and give some good tips to those users on how they can keep up their group and not run into archived group or deleted teams team in this case, so that the life cycle for them is still alive. So I think this was the last question for today, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was the last question, but we still found something very fitting out of the Galactic world that I think works well for Microsoft Teams. So we want to leave you with this quote.
But there's no such thing as the unknown. Only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood.
Thank you very much for listening. You can find us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being a part of the Galactic Collaboration Summit. Join the community and meet in-person world-class Microsoft and MVP speakers this autumn in Wiesbaden, Frankfurt, Germany, with 15 full-day tutorials and over 150 Microsoft 365 and Azure sessions at the combined European Collaboration Summit and European Cloud Summit from 26 to 28 October 2020. Community rocks.